Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Leap Takers podcast, the podcast for the curious, where I'm interviewing daring entrepreneurs, investors and shapers from various fields to learn how they got started on their journey and to discover the insights, tips, tricks and advice they gathered so that you too can take the leap. My guest today is Alisée de Tonnac. Alisée is the founder of Seedstars, a global group of companies with a mission to impact people's lives in emerging markets through technology and entrepreneurship. The group's activities cover over 80 emerging ecosystems through a variety of activities, such as hosting one of the world's largest startup competitions called Seedstars World. They do training and acceleration programs. They have physical hubs called Seedspace. They also do venture capital investments and company building activities. Alisée is also a board member of the School of Management in Fribourg and a member of the Swiss National Innovation Council. She was nominated as a social entrepreneur in Forbes 30 Under 30, an innovation fellow of Wired UK, and also as one of Europe's 50 most influential women in the startup and venture capital space. As always, before we get started, I'd like to share one of my favorite quotes with you to kick off this episode. So here it goes. Whatever you're meant to do it now. The conditions are always impossible. That was a quote by Doris Lessing, and somehow this quote really resonated with me. Having said that, let's get started. Please enjoy this episode with Alisée de Tonnac. Hello, Alisée. Welcome to the Leap Takers podcast. I'm very excited that you decided to come on the show, and I'm looking forward to learn more about you and your journey and Seedstars in the process. So yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to start first, just for people that are not that familiar with you, to tell them, or how would you introduce yourself to someone you haven't met yet at a cocktail party or a dinner party? So very briefly, what are you doing and what are you currently working on?
Yes, I 7 years ago with my co-founders, we launched Seedstars World, which had for objective to impact people's lives in emerging markets. And at that time, what we knew is we're kind of at this sweet spot between the rise of emerging markets, the democratization of technology, and at the same time, kind of this new generation of millennials, but also more and more entrepreneurs that are wanting to change the status quo. And so how could we get involved in all these trends? And quickly with Seedstars, we started building kind of a very clear focus of, on one side, supporting with training, network, mentors, and different types of programs, the entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs in emerging markets. And on the other side, investing in these businesses and helping them scale so that they can become the success stories of their regions.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting. And I would like to dive straight in and ask you a bit about the origin story of Seedstars and then also Seedstars World. So from what I read is that I think you got involved quite early, or like right at the beginning, and met with the other founders. And
yes.
Could you elaborate a bit on how you met them and how you decided to, or why you decided to join Seedstars?
Yes, and so at that time I was working in L'Oréal, the cosmetic group in Italy, and as much as I had been learning a lot, there was a sense of, I think, a lack of vision of how I saw myself in this position and in general in the corporate environment. And so I was very, very fortunate to be at a party with friends and meet one of the co-founders, Pierre-Alain, but I had also known Michael and Benjamin from my previous years at university. And so I was fortunate to kind of first trial meet the right partners with whom I'm still working 7 years later. And it I think what triggered the change from the corporate world to testing out myself in the more entrepreneurial world was that when I had discussed with Pierre-Alain a bit my ambitions and doubts, he on his end had so clearly presented his vision, and what was very impressive is how actionable he was. So it was, okay, by end of next year, I will have done this, this, and this. And I felt like in my world and with whom I was interacting with, all these were far away kind of dreams or hopes or things you'd like to do, but you never get to do. And so I wanted to be around people like that. And Seedstars was really built out of nothing. And that was something extremely exciting. And the mission and the ambitions were also very tempting. And so I quickly jumped into the occasion to start this adventure with them.
And what was his original vision? Was it the same, like how it turned out to be now? Or was it different in the beginning?
At that time, there was more an intention of building companies because we were in Switzerland, out of Switzerland. When we went off to do the first Seedstars World startup competition, and we made a conscious decision to focus on emerging markets because we felt like there was already a lot happening in Europe and the States. Very quickly in our travels, where at that first year we had done 20 countries, quickly it was quite obvious that actually we should be putting our efforts and our energy into supporting, collaborating, investing, recruiting in emerging markets.
Just that I get the picture right. So you were traveling around the world and you were like in different cities holding startup competitions. Is that correct? Or
yes, the first initiative that we launched kind of in parallel of building and investing in businesses was that of building the network. And one vehicle to build an appropriate network of all the stakeholders that participate in building a startup ecosystem, maybe the investors, the different ecosystem builders, the like accelerator programs, co-working spaces, the government agencies, the startups themselves, etc. We thought that a competition would be a great vehicle to filter and qualify such a network that could become extremely powerful. And what we realized later, it became an unbelievable marketing powerhouse, which built the Seedstars brand and what it is today.
Taking a quick step back again, when you were still at L'Oréal, was it a hard decision to do this leap, or like how did you approach this decision? Did you make like a pro-con list, or was it more a gut feeling?
It's one of the few times I listened to my gut. So it wasn't a structured decision making. It was more kind of, I had reached a point where I felt this complacence that did not make me feel comfortable. And so I was willing to be quite radical in where I would live, the next opportunity I wanted to jump in. But it was, for sure, it was a tough one. Now in retrospect, and having met thousands of entrepreneurs around the world, it was a very easy decision compared to many stories I hear, because I think I was 24. I had no real responsibilities. I had plenty of years ahead to make many mistakes. So in retrospect, it was a very easy decision. I didn't have to fight against family, community, all this did not. I didn't have a family of myself, so all this made it very easy. But yes, of course, when you leave kind of the corporate world, your entourage, which you have selected also kind of naturally around people that are within the corporate world, they fear for your future. And so it made me fear on if I could ever get back or not lose too much. But it was by far the best decision I have ever made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think looking at what you helped build with Seedstars, it sounds definitely like the right decision. And would you say to now other entrepreneurs more generalized advice? If you, let's say, have a mid-20-year-old university graduate and he or she might decide between a corporate job or starting a company, what would your advice be?
I don't know if it's as easy to now to how do I say, to categorize between corporate and startup world. There are so many worlds actually. I think my experience helped me extremely in understanding what I did not want, and that was very valuable. And I was lucky enough to figure out quite fast enough. But I remember choosing my first position for the prestige of the company, for the prestige of the title, for the prestige of the product I was selling. It was important for me to be in luxury, for the career progression I was intended to go on. And all these elements I find have zero value actually. And quickly what I realized is I think you have to choose the right team. And so when doing the interviews for a startup, or when you want to start a company and you're kind of defining what is going to be your founding team, or when you look into different corporate opportunities, it's really to try and figure out who are you going to be working with and who is going to teach you. So who will be your mentor and what will you learn? And of course, also an element of purpose in the bigger mission of that organization, but also your purpose of understanding what is concretely your value added to the bigger purpose on a quite short-term basis. I find it's a long and painful process to build a company or to grow within any organization. And so those kind of more short-term wins and clarity on how you bring value on a more short-term basis, I find is fundamental. And especially now that I'm managing people, I realize how crucial it is in motivating and retaining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you touched on something very important there as well in the beginning when you said that you should know what you do not want. And I feel like that's very important. So it helps people to first, get a job that they think they would like, and then treat it more as an experiment and see, that could be something for me. And if they realize it's not what they want, you can switch or kind of figure it out. Yeah, I think no one will get it in the first try. Yeah.
I know there are some people that I see with an unbelievable drive and conviction of what is their purpose and how they want to move forward. But most of us need to be experimenting, and there's always a way out and there's always a way in. And I think that's that level of confidence in the uncertainties is fundamental. Mm-hmm. You need to build it with experience. So there's no point hiding, and there's no point waiting for the perfect job or the perfect idea.
Yeah, I fully agree. You also already touched a little bit on my next question beforehand, but I was really wondering how you approached building up this whole competition. And because I see it almost a little bit as a chicken and egg problem. Like you have to bring or provide value to startups through having a big network and a reputation. But then you also need to get the first startups to come and want to participate. So how did you solve that problem?
So there was definitely a level of just doing it. And I think a lot of people underestimate that first step of executing it, because the moment in which we started doing it and we started adding to the list 10, 15, 20 countries, we were much further ahead of any other competition or potential network trying to build something similar. There's an element of faking it. So we decided to take a calculated number. We take the risk of committing to an investment in the winners when we didn't have the money at that point. We started the competition when we knew we had funds to last until halfway, but we took the risk of taking all the flights. So it was a way also to make sure we had enough motivation to fundraise and be creative of how would we build a business model that would self-sustain. So I think that element of actually going on the ground and doing it, of faking it, but also with a confidence that we believed in what we did, and more importantly, we really believed in the quality that we committed to, and that's from how we presented to the type of support we committed to the startups. Of course, many failures, many errors, many misunderstandings on the way, but those kind of three elements really helped us. And I think I don't remember whom, but was saying, fake it until you become it. And I find it very true, the idea that you fake it to become what you've actually kind of oversold. And I think that's a very important element when you start out.
Yeah. And I think you also need definitely to have that vision clearly where you want to go and have for the full conviction to make it work.
Yes, because for sure you'll be failing more than you've expected.
Yeah. So what was one of your, let's say, favorite moments along the journey of getting Seedstars off the ground? Anything that comes to mind?
Now it's been so long. There are many, but it's because
it can also be a reason.
You have brought me back so far away. I think the world tour was unbelievable because there was a level of exposure to different people, talents, cultures, challenges, opportunities, that it really defined how I wanted. It really defined kind of the tone at which I wanted to continue kind of walking on this earth, and how I wanted to choose the people that surrounded me and what type of person I wanted to be. And so it really shaped me as a person. And it's still some of the most memorable experiences of people with unbelievable generosity and intelligence and culture that I have been exposed to. And Seedstars has always been able to give this to me. And so now I have people that I love working with, and I love meeting the entrepreneurs, and I love interacting with our investors and partners. And so there's just that level of that comfort of being with such great people, I have to say, which in the end is what is most memorable.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think, if you build something like that up, you can really shape it also the way you want something to look like, and have the people involved that you want to work with. So that's a great benefit there. Which brings me to, kind of today. Where is Seedstars today? Like, what is currently happening? And are there like specific trends that you're seeing, or like companies that you're specifically looking for in the competitions? Like, just talk a little bit about where you're at today and what's going on.
So Seedstars is everything but just a competition now. Really, if I had to kind of break us down, on one side there is everything that needs to be done to build a more robust pipeline of impact businesses in emerging markets. And one initiative is the competition, which sheds lights on these businesses, which shows you what type of entrepreneurs come out of Kazakhstan or Guatemala, and at the same time provides a level of training, access to funding to these entrepreneurs. But then quickly we wanted to become much more relevant on the ground on a day-to-day basis and not punctually every year. And so we now have 12 physical campuses, which we call the Seedspaces, which host entrepreneurs and other like-minded entrepreneurial minds under one roof, and where we operate different activities with corporates, government, and foundations that have objectives to access such markets and talents. And on the other side, we continue our investments. I believe now we have a portfolio of 60 businesses, early stage. And we've announced earlier this year a more Series A fund for Africa that we're currently fundraising for, and something that we'll be replicating in the other continents. So we're still very much aligned with our initial vision, and continuing on one hand to be an active participant in the growth of these ecosystems, and on the other hand, a very active investor, to the point that we also have our own company studio. So we have ourselves launched with our teams businesses in Nigeria or Myanmar, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely a great mission that you have with Seedstars, and especially in these regions that maybe don't have that much infrastructure yet for entrepreneurs to really get their companies off the ground. And then I think Seedstars is a great place for them to get started. Do you have any resources or like recommendations for founders that want to become part of Seedstars or like get involved, or also just general recommendations or advice that you have for entrepreneurs?
So if I understood, when you say founders, is how to be part of our programs or competition or?
Yes. So one would be, how can they become part of the program? Yes. And second is just general tips. It can also be like books or tools that you think are helpful for entrepreneurs.
Sure. So I think it's easiest actually to go on our website, seedstars.com, because depending on the maturity of the business, depending on its industry, its geography, we have more or less tailored programs. And the competition is not the only point of entry. So we've just launched a MENA acceleration program out of Saudi Arabia. We have launched one in Peru and Cambodia. Some are industry specific, others agnostic. So I think it's best to go on seedstars.com and connect with us to understand what is it that we're doing that would fit the maturity of the business, the challenges that need to be supported, to receive support on, and we would have a more or less tailored approach to that. Generally, we've been very fortunate that a lot of very wise women and men have been quite hooked or interested by what we do. So we really have great mentorship and a quite sincere one where we get very valuable feedback, which is honest, transparent, and hard sometimes. But that has been really for me as I grow as a talent within the company, but also whilst we question our strategy, has been fundamental. So I would advise to surround yourself well, but I wouldn't do it as a checklist of I need a mentor, so I'm going to get myself a mentor. It unfortunately comes quite informally. It's very authentic and sincere. If not, it quickly becomes bullshit and process or some form of process which doesn't bring much value. And then everyone comes, because we're quite a large team, and so we have everyone that comes in with different books, essays, blog posts, TEDs, whatever the format may be, of interesting stories, analysis that have always supported us. So we've always been big readers, viewers on different subjects, and it goes from how we challenged ourselves on rethinking the values and how we disseminate the culture of Seedstars, to how do we build the pitch for a specific product, to how do we manage a reorganization. So we do that a lot across all challenges that we have.
And is there any, like, let's say, specific favorite book that you have that you read in the last few years that you would recommend? It doesn't even need to be specifically about entrepreneurship. It can also be fiction, just something that you thought was like great or like a good read for someone.
Yeah. These questions, what bothered me is that afterwards I'm like, oh, I forgot to mention this one.
Well, if something else comes to mind, I can add it to the show notes later as well. So,
but the latest, the one that pops in my mind is Principles from Ray Dalio, and I didn't even read it completely, but we've used a lot of point. I mean, we've discussed it a lot in how we wanted to run our business and how transparent we want to be within the whole organization. And so it's been he's been coming up a lot very recently. So that would be one.
Yeah, I also agree. I thought it was a great book when I read it, and there's also like a summary online that is even freely available where you get the main points.
And then there's also, because I'm very fortunate to be meeting with the author of The Human Network in Lausanne actually very soon. And so they kindly gave us his book, and it's very fascinating to see the level of dependencies and influences across informal or formalized networks, and what does that mean. And so I thought it was a very interesting read.
What was the name again? The Human Project?
Or Network.
Then, okay.
By Matthew Jackson.
Okay, great. I'll also make sure to list this in the show notes. Good. Then to wrap it up with like maybe the last two questions, I always like to ask the guest also some personal questions. So do you have any advice for your younger self? Like let's say 5 or 10 years ago, anything that comes to mind?
Just chill. Just chill.
It's good. It's short and good.
Yeah.
Okay. And you must be very busy, like also traveling a lot as part of your job. So is there any hobby or routine that you have that helps you to decompress and relax?
So in the good days, because I would love to tell you it's regular all year round, but nope. But when I do have the energy, what helps me the most is yoga and hiking. So these have really been like very clear, objective activities where I've seen there's immediate effect on my mental sanity.
Is it any specific type of yoga?
No, I do a bit of everything.
Okay, good. Then we can come to my last question, which is my typical ending question of the podcast, because it's the theme of the podcast is leap taking or the leap takers. So I always ask my guests, what does courage mean to you personally?
What does courage mean? What comes to mind immediately is really authenticity. Because I think every time I've had to kind of strip down my ego and be very transparent and honest with my current sentiments or my beliefs or my opinions, it's where I've had to have the most courage. And it's probably where, if I have to look back, it's where I've had the least courage to be in my authentic self.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah. So where can people find more about you? Like, are you on Twitter, or like where could people find more about yourself?
No, unfortunately, I don't. I don't know how to communicate across these platforms. So it's really through Seedstars it's where I work.
Very most active.
I think through Seedstars you can really experience kind of what's taking place and how we're working and with whom we're working. But yeah, sorry, there's nothing more personal out there.
Okay. Thanks again for coming on the podcast, Alisée. I thought this was a really interesting conversation, and thanks for sharing your insights.
Thank you. And thank you for listening.
Good. Then all the best to you and Seedstars.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. You could do me a really big favor if you quickly head over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts and give the Leap Takers podcast a 5-star rating. This would really help me to get more visible, and that I'll be able to continuously bring on great guests to this show. So thank you very much. In addition, I'm also happy about any type of feedback that you might have, or ideas for future guests and the questions you would like me to ask them. So if you have any ideas, just shoot me a message. You can find all my podcast episodes as well as my contact details on leaptakers.com, or you can also just follow me on Twitter and Instagram, where you should be able to find me under Remo Keyboards. Next to the podcast, I also started writing some blog posts on the Leap Takers website. So there I write about various topics, be it about investing, entrepreneurship, traveling, or just some new cool products that I tried. It's all there. So check it out if you like. Having said that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay curious, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye-bye.